Raising taxes in a recession, that's what Democrats did over the weekend. Will it cost them in November? And what will it cost you as well? Some good questions. Good morning, everybody. It's Monday. I'm Bill Hemmer, morning at home. Hello there.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
It's been a minute.
It's been a little bit of time, but I'm glad to be here. I'm Dana Perino, and this is America's Newsroom. So a ton of activity over the weekend. The Democrats think they're riding high, but it's been after a year of negotiations, and Senate Democrats finally got their enormous spending bill across the finish line. It passed on a party line vote. All 50 Republicans voted no.
So what is in this thing, huh? Capital T for thing. Hundreds of billions for climate change. Deficit reduction and tax hikes. It could also turbocharge the IRS. We'll have more on that coming up in a moment, Dana.
Democrats named it the Inflation Reduction Act. Republicans say that's laughable, and not even Bernie Sanders is buying it.
I want to take a moment to say a few words about the so-called Inflation Reduction Act that we are debating this evening. And I say so-called, by the way, because according to the CBO and other economic organizations who have studied this bill, it will in fact have a minimal impact on inflation.
We have Team Fox coverage. Mark Thiessen is on deck with analysis, but we begin at the White House where Jackie Heinrich is standing by. Hi, Jackie.
Hey, good morning to you, Dana. Well, Democrats certainly think that bringing key priorities on health care and climate across the finish line ahead of the midterms will turn things around for them. But poll after poll has shown that the biggest problem for the president and his party is inflation. And even though they've dubbed this bill the Inflation Reduction Act, the Congressional Budget Office found that it will have little to no impact on inflation, the biggest issue for voters this year and maybe next year. Democrats say prescription drug costs will fall after Medicare negotiations. They also believe that energy costs will be reduced by rebates and credits. But experts say that money remaining in people's pockets will still be in circulation. It'll have no impact on overall inflation. And even Bernie Sanders, as you just mentioned, who ultimately did vote for this bill, referred to it as the so-called Inflation Reduction Act.
While Americans continue to pay outrageously high gas prices at the pump, prices are going down, but they're still a lot higher than they were a year ago, 2 years ago. Clearly, the inflation of today is pushing the average person even further behind.
The bill also imposes a new 15% corporate minimum tax on large profitable companies to be enforced by 87,000 new IRS agents that will grow that agency's staff larger than the Pentagon, State Department, FBI, and Border Patrol combined. And Republicans are now zeroing in on that. They're trying to peel off Democrat votes in the House this week, saying that Democrat promises not to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year are pretty hollow because these new corporate tax increases could ultimately be passed off to the consumer. And also new IRS agents could mean new audits for the middle class. RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel says Democrats will pay the price in November for raising taxes on families during a recession. And Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has been urging all House Republicans to vote no. We are expecting a vote in the House this coming Friday. Dana.
All right. Thank you so much, Jackie. Good to see you.
Mark Thiessen joins our coverage. Mark, good morning to you. Bernie Sanders says it's a so-called Inflation Reduction Bill. He said it'll have a minimum impact, and he still voted for it. That's rich.
Yeah, well, give Bernie points for honesty. I mean, you know, the whole name, Inflation Reduction Act, is a lie. You know, if you want to know whether this is a political winner for Democrats, just ask yourself, why did they call it the Inflation Reduction Act instead of the Climate Change Reduction Act? And it's simple, because they know that while climate change is the #1 issue for most of their left-wing activists, only 1% of Americans say that is the top priority. And the fact is the bill does not reduce inflation. In fact, the Penn-Wharton model says that in the short term, in the immediate term, it'll actually nominally increase inflation. And, you know, so if the Democrats went to the American people and say, if they were proud of this, they'd be shouting climate change from the rooftops. They'd be saying, hey, America, guess what we did? We hired 87,000 IRS auditors to take more of your money so we could spend it on climate change. Good for us. Vote for Democrats. They're not doing that.
On the way into work today, my husband was calling the bill the Once Upon a Time bill. As he said, it was a total fairy tale. And I said, well, maybe I'll use that line, but I will give him credit for it. Wow. I do want to point this out, that the IRS staffing, if you look at this now compared to other agencies, it's incredible. Call for number 4. a total estimate of 165,000 employees. The State Department only has 23,000. The FBI at 35,000. And the Customs and Border Protection at 60,000. And who does the IRS have to target? And we know this to be true, that they go after people, the majority of people making $200,000 a year or less. And what does that lead to, Mark?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, there aren't 87,000 wealthy people in this country who can billionaires and who they can go after. So of course they're going to go after the middle class. First of all, good luck finding 87,000 workers. We're in the middle of a historic labor shortage where there are literally almost 11 million unfilled jobs in America today. You get 60% of small businesses can't say they can't find workers to fill a job opening they have. And so the answer of the federal government is to go and pass money to dip into the labor pool and take 87,000 workers out of the productive sector of the economy in order to sick the IRS on auditing Americans. That doesn't seem either politically popular or very smart.
I think the idea they're going to sell it on is they're going to go after billionaires who cheat. Well, you know what billionaires do? They have entire staffs that keep them out of the way of the IRS. But out of Syracuse University, households with less than $25,000 a year in earnings are 5 times as likely to be audited by the agency than everyone else.
Yeah.
How do you defend that?
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So what this is basically a squeeze money out of the American people's pockets bill. They're going to try to hire 87,000 auditors to go after us. And then second thing they're going to do is they're going to raise taxes on us. They're raising this bill. Biden broke his promise not to raise taxes on people making $400,000 or less. It's very clear the Joint Tax Committee found that it does. And also the other thing it's doing, this is why it's going to make inflation worse, is if 50% of the tax increases hit manufacturers. So the reason we have inflation today is because demand is outstripping supply. Biden juiced demand with a $1.9 trillion COVID spending bill, which was really social spending disguised as COVID relief. And then the supply can't keep up because they can't find workers. So manufacturers already are having trouble because of supply chain issues and labor shortage. And now we're going to impose a massive tax increase on them. How is that going to increase supply? It's not. It's going to depress supply. What we need in this economy is less demand and more supply. And what Biden just did is tax supply. When you tax something, you get less of it.
Well, what's interesting is that the media had all of these pre-written stories. Like, you know how they have pre-written obituaries? The media seemed to have pre-written Joe Biden comeback stories. They were all ready to go, and they're everywhere. But yet still, that didn't quiet the talk this weekend of prominent Democrats and liberals suggesting that Joe Biden shouldn't run for office again. Senator Blumenthal was one of them. But Maureen Dowd in the New York Times suggested that this string of successes or wins that Joe Biden has should basically give him confidence that he's done what he said he was going to do and that he should not run again. Last thought on that.
Yeah, the rationalizations are already coming out. Look, they can't openly say before the November elections that Biden shouldn't run because that's not what you say before going into an election. But as soon as this election is over, look, Joe Biden's problem, the reason why he can't run for re-election is because not only has he lost swing voters, he's lost his base. 75% of Democrats in this country say he shouldn't run again. So when you don't have your base and you don't have the swing voters, you're dead in the water. But of course, they can't say that before the election. But as soon as this election is over, particularly if they get the kind of shellacking that they will and lose control of the House, and they're going to lay it at the feet of Joe Biden, the calls are going to become much more vocal to push Biden aside.
Thank you, Mark.
Inside the House.
Thank you, Mark, so much. Ironic that the president's been on the second floor of the White House for the last couple of weeks.
Ironic?
Recovering from his ironic. What all this stuff was being pushed forward?
Well, the media has plenty of those stories, too, about how brilliantly they executed it. And look, they did get some wins. They did. Yeah, Bernie Sanders is not thrilled, though. Look at this picture from him on Saturday. Now it's super hot in August. Here he is.
He's like, give me the hill.
I'm like, why don't you just go inside?
No, he's saying, give me the hills of Vermont during that. Speaking of COVID, this question came up with our team and Senator Warren about are you testing when you're going into the Senate chamber before this vote, et cetera? And it went down like this on Saturday.
Have you guys been told by anybody not to get tested?
No, and please. The Republicans are concerned about Democrats showing up with COVID. The Republicans who wouldn't wear masks, the Republicans who wouldn't test, the Republicans who tested positive and still showed up. I'm telling you, they just know no limits on their political gamesmanship.
Do you remember when they did the same thing about not testing when Speaker Pelosi needed every single Democrat to be there to vote for her? I mean, we all get it.
Yeah.
We get the joke, indeed.
They needed every Democrat there this weekend, for sure.
Indeed. And also happening this weekend, a second bus of migrants from Texas arrived in New York City yesterday. Mayor Eric Adams was there to meet them. He only got 14 off. The mayor says he expected 40, and he's not sure where the rest are. Today's New York Post suggests border crossers are afraid to come to New York City because of all the crime. Nate Foy is live in New York City. He's got more on this for us. Hi, Nate.
Hey, Dana and Bill. Yeah, you mentioned 14 of an expected 40 migrants got off that bus, and Mayor Adams was there to greet them here in Midtown Manhattan, just a few blocks away from where we are right now. And he says there's rumors that some migrants got off the bus at different stops along the way. Take a look at this group that arrived at the Port Authority yesterday, just like that first group on Friday. Mayor Adams says every single migrant will be cared for, but he's again requesting more help from the Biden administration. He says he will be in contact with the White House, but so far the city is still waiting. Mayor Adams also taking another shot at Texas Governor Greg Abbott.
This is horrific when you think about what the governor is doing, the governor of Texas, after a month of traveling across the border, placing on the bus with no direction to come here to New York.
Dana, here's the governor's response. He tweeted just 3 minutes to midnight last night, quote, New York City mayor says this is horrific. Did he say it was horrific when Biden flew plane loads into New York? Nope. Horrific is Biden's policy of letting in roughly 2 million illegal immigrants. The New York mayor has no idea how horrific it really is. This comes, of course, after the first migrant bus again arrived in New York City on Friday, and this group was bigger. It was about 50 migrants. New York Congressman and gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin says the economic burden from this will continue to get worse in New York, and he says it's time for the Biden administration to lead.
If these people refuse to go down to the border to solve this, all of a sudden the border is making its way to Washington, D.C. The border is making its way up to New York. We have to work together as Americans to tackle this.
You hear the congressman mention Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser there plans to amend her request for National Guard support. That initial request was rejected on Friday by the Pentagon, but this is just the beginning. According to Governor Abbott, he says thousands more migrants will be arriving not only in Washington, D.C., but also here in New York City in the coming months, Dana.
Nate Foy for us in New York City. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. 13 past, China blowing past. Well, this happened in no time. A masked gang of smash and grab robbers pulled a 30-second heist at a high-end New York jewelry store. They cleaned out the place and more than $2 million in merch. David Lee Miller in New York City with more on that. Happened in an instant. David Lee, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Well, this robbery was not only quick, it appears to have been very well planned. It happened Friday afternoon in the Fordham Heights section of the Bronx. Security video released by the NYPD shows the heist from the very beginning to the end. You can see a man wearing a white T-shirt buzzed into the store, but instead of immediately entering, he holds open the front door for 3 masked men, and within seconds they start smashing glass display cases with a hammer, removing trays filled with jewelry. And some of the trays are dumped into a red plastic bag. Others are just carried out of the store. All the while, the man in the white T-shirt stays outside, serving as a lookout. Now, the store is located along a very busy shopping area. Take a look at the video. You can see a small number of people walking by during the robbery. A few look in. Most are seemingly unaware of what is taking place inside. The end of the recording shows the 4 robbers racing out of the door and heading down the street. Police say they took with them $2.15 million worth of high-end diamond jewelry. As of this moment, there have not been any arrests during the smash and grab. There were no injuries. According to the most recent crime statistics, overall crime in New York City is up over 30% compared to 1 year ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is something else to watch. David Lee, thank you. Here in New York. Dana?
Let's bring in former NYPD Inspector Paul Morrow. It's good to have you here. I mean, there's that crime there, and then you have just written a piece that I highly recommend to everybody at foxnews.com. It's called AOC MIA, who can blame her? The Congresswoman's constituents are learning that defund has consequences. You grew up in that district, then you became an NYPD officer, and you took a look at some of the statistics. What did you find?
So the exercise was pretty simple. I just took the 8 commands that are encompassed by her district, and I just ran the crime numbers. The NYPD publishes these publicly. They're on the website. And the findings were startling. Over the last 2 years in AOC's district, overall crime is up 57%. And so I should mention that I don't know what specific command that smash and grab occurred in. She does have a significant portion of the East Bronx, so it's relevant.
And you also looked at felonies, up 57% since 2020. This is call for number 2 for people at home. Shooting victims up 40% since 2020. Shooting incidents since 2020. And all along, you have had her suggesting, defunding the police, reimagining the criminal justice department. You also named her the Duchess of Defund. What are the practical impacts of that on the district, especially when it comes to people who are trying to start businesses or get their kids safely to school?
Well, I think we just saw them, right, in the clip that you guys just showed. But to really demonstrate where the rubber hits the road, because, statistics sometimes can be, a little bit amorphous. In the last 2 years, there have been actually 48 more people shot in her command, in her district, than since 2020. So those are 48 people out there whose lives have been irrevocably altered because of this defund policy. I mean, there's just really no other way to put it. And many of those people, let's be frank, are likely dead.
And what about the fact that what you found, and I thought this was interesting in the piece, is what she chooses to comment on a lot of things, and she's out there and she's prolific and she's got a great media presence, but she doesn't talk too much about these victims.
Yeah, so to do this, one of the things I made sure I did was did the research. I went back through her 2 Twitter feeds. She has 2. And you see very little commentary about it. And, isn't it rich? While she's down in D.C. getting fake arrested, there are equally fake arrests going on in her district. The problem is the criminals here are real. And the arrests are fake because, of course, the criminals are getting released, very, very quickly.
The other thing that we found today is that there's this growing trend of NYPD police officers who are deciding to resign, get out of policing before getting their full pension. A 71% jump from 2021. You can see the statistics there. You recently retired. What does this tell you if people are willing to leave the police force before that full pension is manifested?
Yeah, Dana, this is really this is a troubling statistic. First of all, in New York City, I don't care where you're a cop, actually. Let's take it nationally. Every police officer joins any police department because he or she wants to be the good guy. I don't care who it is. It's not about the money. If you go into police work for money, you're in for a rude awakening. When you take that motive away from police officers, when you make them the bad guy, you end up with an empty shell of a police officer. And that, I think, is what we're beginning to see here, and it's really starting to have impact. And the other thing, particularly in New York, is that when you see police officers willing to give up on their pensions, which is a significant motivator, you tell yourself on your hard days, this is bad, I'm tired of hearing this, people are yelling at me, etc. But you know what? Someday I'm going to have my pension, I'm going to be retire, and I'm going to be able to live a more relaxed life. The fact that folks are giving up on their pensions and either decamping for different jobs or different jurisdictions is very, very troubling. And I think that the police department is going to have some real problems. Retention and recruitment is down, and that is bad news for the future of this town.
And the bail reform laws are still not changed, and so a little bit of doom on the horizon. Thank you for writing that at foxnews.com. AOC MIA, who can blame her? Paul Morrow, thank you.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you, Paul. Meanwhile, from California, LA's far-left DA, George Gascon, apparently on a mission to get some inmates off death row. Why would that be the case? And what does former deputies have to say about it? And the Taliban took control of their first Afghan province 1 year ago today. We all know what eventually that would lead to. General Jack Keane with a look back and more next.
We're kind of watching in slow motion the bloody and ugly situation in Afghanistan, which will likely be the collapse of the government and also their security forces as the Taliban are on the verge of taking over.
Again, the Chinese military added another day of drills around Taiwan. President Biden, for his part, left the White House over the weekend out of COVID protocol, heads to eastern Kentucky in a moment. But before he left, took a question about China and the Taiwanese.
How worried are you about the situation in Taiwan? Because China is kind of keeping a bit of a grip around the whole island now.
I'm not worried, but I'm concerned that they're moving as much as they are. But I don't think they're going to do anything more.
Did you know the wise move of the speaker to go to Taiwan?
That was her decision.
Are you still going to do student loans this month?
Okay, so a couple things there. One on Nancy Pelosi, the other on how far China goes. I want to bring in General Jack Keane to talk about this. General, good morning to you. China has not been at war since 1979. And they add another day here. I mean, the word is they're trying to coordinate the Air Force with the Navy, with the Army, et cetera. What's your read on what's happening now, sir?
Well, certainly, President Xi obviously reacting to the visit and sending a loud message. But my concern is not so much President Xi. My concern is with this administration. And are they going to finally accept the fact that self-censorship in terms of our rhetoric, self-deterrent in terms of the kinds of visits we have, no military visits, no training visits with Taiwan, and no significant arming of Taiwan, and those two issues, plus the general appeasement policy, Bill, of not wanting to provoke the Chinese, this policy has been in effect for years, and you got to conclude it's a massive failure because President Xi, every single year for the 10 years he's been in power, has been increasing the intimidation and coercion of Taiwan principally and in the region generally. He is more aggressive than his predecessors by far and more ambitious. And he has stated time and time again, like Putin stated time and time again when it came to Ukraine, that he fully intends to take this by force if the Taiwanese do not capitulate. And they're not going to capitulate. So what is the lesson we should learn from this? Is that this general policy of trying to avoid provoking the Chinese is not working. It's a massive failure. They are increasing their aggression. And what we need to do is help Taiwan even more than what we are doing. Arms, munitions, training, doing exercises together. But right now, as we speak, Bill, we are being told that this administration is pushing back on the bipartisan bill in the Senate to provide significant more increased support economically and militarily to Taiwan. Can you imagine that? That's the conclusion that the Biden administration gets out of this, is to do less.
Wow. We'll watch that. General, 1 year ago today, the first province in Afghanistan fell to the Taliban. Nikki Haley over the weekend was asked about this on Fox News Sunday. She says that was the moment when the world saw us as weak.
Mark my words, had we under in Afghanistan, we would not be having the war you're seeing in Ukraine. We would not have al-Qaeda terrorists sitting there running free in Afghanistan. We would not have China showing the arrogance that they're showing over Taiwan. This all happened because of how America showed weakness. Now we have to find our strength, and we better get to work, and we better get to work soon.
What do you think of that? Tying it all back to Kabul.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's principally correct. I mean, we can't prove all of that, certainly, but just applying some common sense to what has taken place here. I mean, it was a major inflection point for this administration. What drove this really was the unconditional withdrawal with a date certain, emphasis on unconditional, no ceasefire, no peace agreement. And there weren't even any real substantive negotiations going on. We were just going to walk away. And I think the American people saw it as a huge foreign policy and national security failure, regardless of whether what their political alignment was. They saw this as American weakness, and I think it had a major impact adversely on this administration. But the accelerant it became for Russia, absolutely. I mean, a couple of months after the debacle in Afghanistan in August, Putin puts 170,000 troops on Ukraine's border. Is there a relationship with what took place in Afghanistan? I believe yes. It became an accelerant for President Xi. And it became an accelerant for the Iranians. I mean, they began enriching uranium from single digit all the way to the 60%, which is close to weapons grade, all after the Afghanistan debacle. We can't absolutely prove it, but just looking at it, our adversaries did become more aggressive because they believed they could take advantage of this administration.
Yeah. A major inflection point. Sir, thank you. We're going to reflect a lot on this in the coming days here in the month of August. Jack Keane, thank you for your time today.
Yeah, great talking, Bill.
Okay.
Have a wonderful week.
You bet.
Dana reads sports.
Oh, how I missed this segment. All right, women's basketball legend Sue Bird playing her final regular season home game for the Seattle Storm. A young fan giving her a flower during the game. The Las Vegas Aces played spoiler, though, winning the game. Bird is retiring after, get this, 19 seasons and 4 WNBA championships. Meanwhile, in baseball, a stunning comeback for Jacob deGrom. The Mets pitcher in his first home game in more than a year after being injured. He threw a perfect game for more than 5 innings. The Mets beat the Braves 2. Did you watch baseball this weekend?
A little bit. Mets are a much better team with deGrom on the mound, however.
Well, I mean, obviously, yes, obviously. Everyone knows that.
Did you? Quit with the obvious, Hammer. Did you watch baseball over the weekend?
I did not. I played, though. I was amazing.
How was your tennis game?
It's better. I've spent a lot of money to be told to keep my eye on the ball. Thank you, Nico. Yes, he is. He's really good. He told me he invented that phrase as well. I got to talk to my mom about that because obviously I didn't learn it when I was a kid. I spent a lot of money. Anyway, Los Angeles County's embattled and progressive district attorney George Gascon. He's been working to get several death row inmates resentenced to life without parole. Former deputy DAs say that may be part of an effort to eventually get them out of prison. Senior national correspondent William Lajeunesse is live in LA, been covering this. William, what did you find?
Well, Dana, this is unprecedented, really. You have the prosecutor reversing, sometimes decades later, the sentences of more than a dozen felons on death row, reducing those to life in prison. So according to Gascon's directive 2011, a sentence of death is never an appropriate resolution in any case. The district attorney's office will not defend existing death penalty sentences and will in thorough review of every existing death penalty judgment from LA County with the goal of removing the sentence of death. So we obtained that list of 65 LA cases that are under review among the 700 inmates on death row. So far, Gascon has sought or successfully got at least 16